Hi prospective new year 12s, well year 11s at the moment but soon to be year 12s. This is the A-level geography sixth form induction and we hope that this is going to set you up really well for the summer tasks which you will find on the school website. So we wanted to do something a little bit different, and when we first started doing inductions sort of 2-3 years ago, we were wanting to be active and really show what geography is all about. Okay, because that's initially why you all chose it for GCSE and then now continuing that journey with A-level geography. So we really think that Barack Obama really encapsulates the essence of geography, and particularly A-level geography. So study of geography is about more than just memorising places on a map. It's about understanding the complexity of our world, appreciating the diversity of cultures that exist across continents, and in the end it's about using all that knowledge to help bridge divides and bring people together. So our aim in the 2 years that you spend with us is really getting you ready for the outside world, being citizens within our very contemporary and at times challenging world. So let's make a start. So firstly, okay, so that you guys know who to expect come September, this is potentially one of your geography teachers. So there won't be a surprise that it's somebody else. Okay, so you'll either have me, who's Miss Wood. Okay, you are going to potentially have Mr. Aberdeen, Mrs. Karen, Miss Gibson, or Mrs. Waldock. Okay, and you'll have two of us. You'll have one for the physical side of the course and one for the human geography side of the course. So myself, Miss Gibson, Mrs. Waldock, we teach the physical side of geography, and Mrs. Karen and Mr. Aberdeen, they teach the human side of the course. So let's get started. So as I said, we want to introduce you to something a little bit different. Hopefully, and I say hopefully because it's possible that some of you haven't done, okay, and that's absolutely fine. We're here to support you and make sure that you feel confident to do everything that the A-level asks of you. So hopefully at GCSE, most of you or all of you have done some field work, okay? So some of you will have been to Walton on the Naze, others of you would have been into Upminster, some of you might have been to Lakeside or Romford, but you would have hopefully done a human geography fieldwork investigation and a physical geography fieldwork investigation. So we're going to try and build on those skills and take them a little bit further today. So we're going to plan and execute our own investigation around the school site. So we're going to try and do this virtually from the comfort of our own homes. Now, geographers are meant to be able to be out in all weathers, but even myself, I'm partial to sitting on a comfy chair and not having to go outside all of the time. Okay, so here we go. So first of all, what could you base an investigation on around the school site? And that's sounding probably quite difficult for some of you that will be new to the school. Okay, so what we're going to do is introduce you to what the school site looks like. So, for example, we could have a look at perceptions of climate change, flood risk, people's perceptions of services in Upminster. We could investigate pollution, and we know we've got lots of different types of pollution, so air, noise, sound. Okay? So let's get an idea of what we could investigate. So while the school has had very few people in it, I did a little bit of a tour myself and started to get an idea of what the school environment was really like. So there's lots of geographical concepts that we will visit over the next 2 years. Specifically, there are 15. Okay? And these really bind and illustrate what geography is all about. So some of these concepts will be the idea of identity. So who we are, how we perceive places, what makes up our identity and what makes up places' identities. Causality, so what are the causes of various different things? It's not always, as we know from GCSE geography, one thing, but multiple factors that interact. Sustainability, so environmental, social, economic. Okay? Resilience, so are places resilient to change? Can they bounce back? Can they maintain momentum? Risk, How at risk are they from change? Okay. Mitigation, what can we do? And adaptation sits very nicely with that as well. So mitigation, what can we do to reduce risks? What can we do to adapt to changing environments as well? So what I did, I took some photographs around the school site. It's even better when it's sunny. So we're going to start off. This is the front of the school site. Okay, so really nice, leafy and green. So I tried to myself come up with a few questions. So that could be something that as you're looking at these pictures, starting to think about what we could investigate. Okay, so here's three possible options. How does environmental quality vary across Cooper's, Cockburn and Company School? So where the hedgerow is in the top corner, which on my mouse is now pointing to, the road runs along here. So environmental quality could be to do with sound, could be to do with air pollution. Okay? Could be where the car park is. Environmental quality might be better in green spaces than more built up environments. Okay? What influences people's perceptions? So is it what they see from the road that they've never been in? Okay, so it could be that. Or those perceptions might change having been to the school. Your perceptions might be developed from what you see on the school website or from coming to an open evening, maybe playing one of the sports teams from your old school. And then to what extent does accessibility vary across the school? Okay, potentially for people that have got impaired vision, a physical disability in some way, can they access the school site in exactly the same way, in an equal way? So is there a level of accessibility and equality? So lots and lots of different things. And in terms of accessibility, you should look at the dropped curbs. Okay, the crossings that exist outside of the school site as well. How many buildings have lift access? So as we start to move into the school site, you will come up to this entrance, and we've got over here we've got the student entrance, which will run down the anniversary corridor, and then as we come through that anniversary corridor, we will then have Cockburn Court, okay, where you've got the canteen, you've got the sixth form block, and you've got this open space which has got lots of seating. So this area is something quite different. Okay? So is the school site sustainable in the 21st century? Now, you might be thinking about vegetation, the environment, but also, can it continue to grow with growing populations? Can it hold more students? What factors shape the identity? So you can see as you come into the school entrance, there's the large school crest that sits on the wall. Maybe it's the buildings. I've already talked about the vegetation. Are some areas more at risk of flooding? You will have done at GCSE the idea of permeable and impermeable surfaces and how that might affect flood risk, for example. Okay. So finally, as we move through the school in kind of the final third, we come up to the AstroTurf, the tennis courts, the pond, which for me is a really quite iconic feature of the school site, and music DT. So potentially again, we see it changing. So do the school facility meet the needs of the school community? Does it need a pond? Is that actually a risk to students? Okay. To what extent is CCS a clone school? So those of you that were former Cooper's students in year 11, okay, we looked at clone towns, and you could potentially apply the same logic to that argument. Is Cooper's like every other school, or what is it that makes it different? And then how does biodiversity vary across the school site? So for example, we could look at the pond as a small ecosystem and habitat, the school field, at the flower beds that sit in Cockburn Court, the front of the school and its tree species, so changing from tall, large coniferous and deciduous trees to hedgerows and small shrubs. Okay? So there's very much lots of potentials in a very small scale basis. And for when you do your non-examined assessment, which is a independent fieldwork investigation at the end of year 12, one of your jobs is going to be to design a question like this and at an appropriate scale. So I know that it's really difficult for you guys to go, well, I can't wander around the school site, I can't collect my own data, so how on earth am I going to do this? So we're going to be thinking outside the box and we're going to do this together. Now, as we do this, you are going to have an A3 sheet. If you don't have a printer at home, that's absolutely fine. Just write the notes down as we go along so you can use the headings from that sheet. So I will show that quickly before we get started. So this is what the sheet looks like. So you will see key question, hypothesis, so making a prediction, methods, where are you going to sample, how are you going to do it, what have you found out, can you actually trust what you've found out. So as we go along, I want you to fill out your A3 sheet, and trust me, it's going to become really useful as we go along. So what I have set us as a task is to find out what factors shape the identity of Coopers. So in terms of identity, okay, we could talk about ourselves and what makes us the person we are. We can do exactly the same thing with looking at places. And often we talk about the physical geography, the demography, so the number of the inhabitants, their ages, ethnicity, cultural, so religion, location, traditions, societies, clubs, and the built environment, so the style of the buildings. I've already discussed the buildings and how they change. So what I want you to do, because lots of you will sit there and go, yeah, I can do this, I've already got a pretty good idea of what Coopers is like, but others of you will need that introduction. But as a refresher and some extra information, if you click on my image here, it will take you to a video which you can watch, which will take you on a short 10-minute tour of the school site and really introduce this theme of identity. So click pause on my video and then we will come back in 10 minutes time. Okay, so in my video I talk quite a lot about identity in relation to the historical, the religious, the cultural elements of the school. And for me and working here, that's quite important. But the other side of things, it's the people. And with people not there, is it the same place? So what I want you to do is think about what happens when we remove certain things as well. Is it still the same place or has it changed? Okay, so next, what I want you to do is start to think about how we could actually find out, because my video alone, that's essentially one person's opinion and one person's perception. It potentially has a bias, and these ideas will come back to you at the end. So we can use something called sampling, and you would have discussed this at GCSE, potentially in part of science, but also as part of your fieldwork investigations as well, where you would have thought about how you collect your data. Okay, so not that you just ask 3 people in a row, but how you're going to get a reliable and valid sample. So here's a situation for you. We need to find out the views of the jelly baby population of erosion of Jelly Baby Coast, but there are 10,000 jelly babies. How would you do it? So, do you ask 10? Is that valid? Is that reliable? Do you ask 100? Is that going to take you too long? Do you have enough time? So, there's 3 key ways we can go about doing this, and 3. So, why do we actually need sampling? So sampling is the process of measuring a small number of sites of people in order to obtain a perspective of all the sites and people, so making it reliable. So why do we use sampling? It's often quicker, especially when time is a constraint. It's cheaper, and I'm not particularly wealthy, and you're probably not either. Okay? Often it's impossible to access the whole population. Some people might not want to contribute to your questionnaire or answer your questions or be part of your survey. Okay? So a sample needs to be representative of the whole population. And representative means how closely the characteristics of the sample match the characteristics of the population. And there we can then make a judgment of reliability. An unrepresentative sample, on the other hand, is going to be biased. And if a biased sample, some elements of the population are less likely to be included. So we lose any sense of reliability, and basically our data becomes worthless. So how do we get a reliable and valid sample? So the first way is systematic. So in a systematic sample, measurements are taken at regular intervals. This is often really good if we want to sample along a beach or along an area of vegetation, or if it's a questionnaire, we could every fifth person who works past, every 20 metres along the street, and we could do our environmental quality, every 50 metres along a beach. Okay, so that's one way. Stratified, strata, and we'll look at this with geology as well, means a layer. So essentially we're taking a layer or a group of the population, and we might select different samples from different groups, and there's lots of calculators you can do to get a really reliable sample for this. So that's stratified. And then random, and it isn't just you go, I'm going to ask that person, I'm going to ask this person, because that has an unconscious bias often associated. Instead, we might use a random number generator. You might become a little bit more old-fashioned when you sit there and you go, I'm going to put numbers 1 to 10 in a hat, and I'm going to pull out, and whatever number it comes, it might be number 4, I'm going to sample every fourth person. And that becomes a little bit more a hybrid approach as well. So there's lots of different approaches that we can take. So there's 2 things that I have done as part of this to help illustrate what we would do. So our question again, what factors shape the identity? So one of the methods I have used is a questionnaire, and this was really great in a virtual environment because it allowed me to access lots of people while still maintaining my own safety and the safety of others. I did it all online through Google Forms. Okay? And I asked students a questionnaire, and I asked staff the same questionnaire. And I asked them a few questions about Coopers and its identity to try and gauge what people actually felt. So I wasn't just taking my opinion, I was taking lots of other opinions. So that might be part of your justification. Okay, so here's the 4 of the key questions. So number 2, how would you describe CCCS in 3 words? And you can see the trends that come out. Welcoming, lovers brethren, which is the school motto. Positive, engaging, supportive. Okay, so we'll come back to presentation in a minute, but thinking about what you could do with those words. Then we've got, what do you think are the 3 most distinctive features of the school site? So this is more of a physical element if you look at the answers. So the lake, the large field, the pond, the pool and the sports courts. Coburn Court, the pond, the field. So we then might want to go back to our categories of identity and factors and say, well, lots of these are physical geography or human geography. So the built environment as well. Then we've got question 4. Which do you think is most important? So actually physically asking people to make a judgment themselves and giving us a very quantitative set of data, so a numerical value, rather than things that are much more qualitative at the bottom and open to interpretation. And then finally 5, on a scale of 1 to 10, and we might consider how reliable people's judgments are, okay, asking them how important they think history and traditions are. Okay, now we'll talk again about this element at the end in terms of our conclusions and our evaluations. And then finally, I asked people, what does CCCS mean to you? Okay, and I summarised it by picking out the key themes. So safe, community, everyone, friends, teachers, lifetime, forever, help, but help in a good way, in that they have lots of help. So lots and lots of positivity from this. I then did exactly the same with staff, but I want you to draw your attention back just for the moment to question 4, and you'll notice that 40% said basically the students are the most important in shaping Cooper's identity, and then cultural factors come at second. So bear that in mind to then what staff say. So here's exactly the same 4 questions, okay, and we see that we've got a change in argument. So 58.3% say that the cultural characteristics are more important than the demographic characteristics, and there's a much more close correlation and grouping of results with the history and traditions question as well. So people feel more strongly about that. But then similar trends, but equally the dominance of the phrase lovers brethren in how people would describe CCCS in 3 words. But similarities in the question which looks at the physical elements of the school site and its environment. And then finally, what does it mean? And this is the same as question 6 on the student questionnaire. Again, people saying safe, family, education, communities, and then instead of teachers, pupils and students. So that connection and that understanding and that relationship between staff and students. So that's one of the methods I have taken, and some of that is already presented, but not all of it is. Secondly, we can then use secondary data. So a questionnaire is primary, as hopefully you guys are well aware, but secondary, well, there's lots of things available online that we can do. So one of the things I did was a Google search analysis, and then I've tried to illustrate 2 ways in which you might want to present this information, because just presenting it on a page with no information isn't particularly useful. It doesn't tell me anything more than just searching it myself in Google. So I've added some arrows in and I've annotated it similarly to what you would do with a field sketch or a photograph, in that you would annotate it. So we've got celebrating successes, so academic achievements, the school crest, so the connections to the past, sporting success and the dominance of rugby, the pupil centred, so the amount of these photos that have students in them, and then finally there's only 1 picture that has physical geography, so that could argue that my questionnaire is a little bit skewed because the dominance of that in people's perception. Alternatively, this is a very qualitative approach, so we're making judgments about what we see. We could turn it into something more numerical and quantitative as well. So you could take the 4 categories of shaping identity, create a key, which is what I've done, and then you've got all of these pictures then with a coloured square on them to then match up with the key, and you can suddenly see the dominance of the yellow images. Then to present this, I've then turned it into a pictogram. I've totaled them up, so those are what the numbers mean, and then I've got 3 castles. So I've got the cultural, so the traditions, the history, religious elements of the school. I've got 16 which are people, and then 1 which is environmental. Now, we might argue this is a small sample, but it's a really clear conclusion we can then draw from this. So what you're going to now do for me is you are going to try and present some of this data. Now, we don't want to overwhelm you, so what we want you to do is go back to the slides which has got the questionnaire data in, or go back to the Google search analysis. Or if you're feeling really brave, you might want to do your own piece of secondary data analysis. Maybe you want to search Coopers on Twitter, maybe find out what's on Facebook, do a website analysis and using a similar coding section. So try and collect your own little bit of data and then presenting it. Now, there's a range of ways that you can present it, and literacy and numeracy skills are going to be really important throughout the A-level, but also your ability to make judgments, and that's really what kind of starts to set A-level geographers apart. So the ability to select appropriate data, and some of our suggestions could be a located bar chart, an isoline map, so connecting points of equal value, a line graph which shows change over time. Now, we don't have a lot of data that shows change over time, but definitely by bar charts, maybe pie charts, pictograms. Be creative with your choice of data presentation. Maybe do a little bit of a Google, see what else is out there. There's lots of people that do very innovative and unique things, so making it individual to you as well. So using those data presentation skills you had from year 11 and year 10. So pause it there and then we'll come back to the conclusions and evaluation in a minute. So here we are. Here's our conclusions and our evaluations. So you hopefully know that a conclusion is that we need to sum up and come to a decision on our overall question. And as a reminder, our overall question, what factors influence and shape the CCCS identity? So what was your hypothesis? So what was your prediction? Did you think it was the people? Did you think that it was going to be the culture and the history? And then what evidence have you got to back this up? And trying to shape both sides of the argument. So I'm going to flick back a few slides very quickly. So, for example, this is a really lovely counter-argument for question 5. For the staff survey, 58.3% of them are saying that it is the cultural characteristics, whereas if we look on the student survey, they're only 33% of them are saying that it is the cultural characteristics. So you've got a disagreement in the argument there, so you can counteract the points of view. And then finally, coming to a judgment overall. And then if you remember in my video, my 10-minute video, which is back at the beginning, we talk about how it's maybe not necessarily just one, but multiple factors and how they combine and come together, and the interaction between multiple different characteristics. So it might not be that you can just necessarily see one factor, but multiples. Then finally, our evaluation. What went well? What didn't go so well? Can you trust the data? So if we have a look back a little bit, we've only collected 2 things. To actually get a more reliable set of data, would we need to collect more data? For my questionnaires, you'll notice there's varying levels of responses. This question had only 11 responses. There are nearly 1,500 students that attend the Coopers Company and Coburn School. So is 11 student answers really a representative sample? Okay. Then we've got 36 staff members. There are quite a lot of staff, but nowhere near as many as students. So 36 is potentially a lot more reliable. Okay? But also, what else might be shaping that? Maybe we need to break it down by age, by gender, how people's perceptions of identity are shaped by other factors as well, to understand the other issues and the other complexities. So that just gives you an idea of some of the elements of it, and hopefully a reminder for you, and just developing into some of the ideas of what we will look at in relation to the investigation elements of the course, which, as I said at the beginning, is worth 20% of your A-level. Now, as a result, and we're really challenging you guys already, we are well aware of this, especially in the current climate, you will notice on the school website, which will be updated, there is a set of summer tasks for you to do. And that summer task is partially how has your local area changed over time. So what we want you to do is use everything that we've introduced to you today to conduct your own mini investigation. So we want you to investigate your own local area and how it has changed over time. Remember, line graphs might be a great way of showing change over time. Okay? So for me, I'd want to go and investigate Upminster. Okay? For some of you, it might be Romford. Others of you, it might be Gideon Park. It could be Barking, East Ham, Stratford, Canary Wharf, wherever you live. Now, we know that it's potentially not going to be particularly easy for you to collect data, okay? Because with social distancing questionnaires, we don't want you putting yourself at risk. So that's why why my image says think outside the box. I managed to do all of this with the aid of a computer, and walking around the school site, but I didn't directly have to interact with anybody in person. So I want you to see how much of your investigation you can do virtually. Now, there'll be a range of things to help you. On the summer task induction booklet, you'll have a set of guidelines to help you. So what to include in an introduction, what to include in your methods. Please do not hesitate to go back to my video. You are more than welcome to rewatch it as many times as you like. We will upload the PowerPoint as well, so you can refer to it at your own time. Okay, but don't worry about getting it wrong. Okay, have a really good go. Use all the skills that you have learnt in Year 11. Use them as a little bit of refresh, and then we're going to come back to these again when we meet you in September with our induction set of work, where we will start the year by again looking at the school site and building on what you've done at the summer and what you've done at home as part of this induction task. So it will all be useful to you then when we come back to you guys actually designing your own independent investigation. Okay, but for now, okay, it's although I physically can't see you, although it would have been amazing to be able to meet all of you and really show our passion as a department, okay, we now get to look forward to meeting you guys all in September. Okay,